The scorching Afghan sun beat down mercilessly as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez patrolled the dusty streets of Kandahar. It was his third deployment, and the 28-year-old Marine had seen enough to last several lifetimes. The familiar weight of his gear felt heavier today, not from the equipment itself but from the emotional burden he carried. Just 2 weeks earlier, his unit had lost 2 good men to an improvised explosive device, and the guilt gnawed at him daily. As Marcus rounded a corner near an abandoned marketplace, something caught his eye. Behind a pile of rubble and twisted metal, he spotted movement. At first, he thought it might be a threat, perhaps an insurgent trying to hide. His training kicked in, and he raised his rifle, signaling to his patrol team to halt. But as he moved closer, his heart sank at what he discovered. There, barely breathing and covered in dirt and dried blood, lay a massive German shepherd. The dog's once proud coat was matted and filthy, and Marcus could see multiple wounds across its body. The animal's ribs were clearly visible through its thin skin, indicating severe malnutrition. What struck Marcus most were the dog's eyes. Despite the obvious pain and suffering, they held an intelligence and dignity that reminded him of his own military working dogs back home. The German shepherd tried to lift its head when Marcus approached, but the effort was too much. A weak whimper escaped its throat, and Marcus felt something stir deep inside his chest. He had always been drawn to animals, especially dogs, but military protocol was clear about interactions with local wildlife. Still, something about this particular animal called to him in a way he couldn't explain. Marcus knelt down slowly, removing his gloves to get a better look at the injuries. The dog had what appeared to be shrapnel wounds on its left side, likely from the same explosion that had devastated this part of the marketplace weeks ago. There were also signs of infection, and the animal was clearly dehydrated. By all medical standards, this dog should have died days ago, yet somehow it had held on. His patrol team gathered around, and Corporal Jenkins shook his head grimly. "Sarge, that thing's done for. We should put it out of its misery and move on." The other Marines nodded in agreement. It was the practical thing to do. They had a mission to complete, and a dying dog was not their responsibility. But as Marcus looked into those intelligent brown eyes, he made a decision that would change everything. "No," Marcus said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "We're taking him back to base." The team exchanged glances, knowing better than to argue with their sergeant when he used that tone. Marcus carefully wrapped the dog in his own poncho, amazed at how little the animal weighed. As he lifted the German shepherd, he felt a weak movement. The dog was trying to lick his hand. The journey back to Forward Operating Base Chapman seemed endless. Marcus carried the dog the entire way, feeling its labored breathing against his chest. Several times he thought the animal had died, only to feel a slight movement that indicated life still flickered within. His fellow Marines remained skeptical about the wisdom of his decision, but they respected their sergeant enough to follow his lead. When they finally reached the base, Marcus headed straight for the medical tent. Doc Martinez, the unit's corpsman, took one look at the dog and whistled low. "Marcus, what have you gotten yourself into? This animal needs a veterinarian, not a medic trained for humans." But seeing the determination in Marcus's eyes, Doc Martinez agreed to do what he could. The examination revealed the extent of the dog's injuries. Besides the shrapnel wounds and malnutrition, the German shepherd had a broken rib and signs of severe dehydration. Doc Martinez worked carefully, cleaning the wounds and administering antibiotics meant for humans. "I can't promise anything," he told Marcus. "This dog has been through hell, and honestly, I'm surprised it's still alive." That night, Marcus set up a makeshift bed for the dog in an unused corner of the supply tent. He used his own sleeping bag and positioned himself nearby, checking on the animal every few hours. The German shepherd remained unconscious most of the time, but occasionally its eyes would flutter open, seeking Marcus's face in the dim light. As Marcus sat watching over the dog, memories of his childhood came flooding back. He remembered his own German shepherd, Max, who had been his constant companion growing up in a rough neighborhood in Los Angeles. Max had died while Marcus was away at boot camp, and he had never quite gotten over the loss. Perhaps that was why this dying dog had affected him so deeply. The other Marines in his unit began to whisper about their sergeant's unusual behavior. Some questioned whether the stress of deployment was getting to him, while others admired his compassion. Captain Williams, their commanding officer, paid a visit to check on the situation. After seeing Marcus's dedication and the dog's fighting spirit, he gave unofficial permission for the animal to remain on base, provided it didn't interfere with military operations. By dawn, the German Shepherd was still breathing, though barely. Marcus had spent the entire night awake, watching and waiting. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the tent, he made a promise to the unconscious animal. "If you keep fighting, boy, I'll fight with you. We're going to get through this together." Little did Marcus know that this promise would set in motion a series of events that would transform both their lives in ways he could never have imagined. 3 days passed, and the German Shepherd showed small but encouraging signs of improvement. Marcus had named him Courage, a fitting title for an animal that refused to give up despite overwhelming odds. The dog could now lift his head for short periods and had managed to drink small amounts of water. More importantly, his eyes had regained some of their alertness following Marcus's movements around the tent. Marcus found himself spending every free moment with Courage. Between patrols and duties, he would sit beside the dog, talking softly about his life back home, his family, and his dreams for after the military. Surprisingly, these one-sided conversations became a source of comfort for Marcus, helping him process the stress and trauma of deployment in ways he had never experienced before. The breakthrough came on the 4th morning when Marcus entered the tent to find Courage attempting to stand. The dog's legs were shaky and weak, but the determination was unmistakable. "That's it, boy," Marcus encouraged, kneeling down to offer support. "Take it slow." Courage managed to remain upright for nearly 30 seconds before carefully lowering himself back down, but the progress was remarkable. Word of the recovering dog spread throughout the base, and Courage began receiving visitors. Hardened Marines who had seen countless horrors found themselves drawn to the gentle animal. Private Thompson, barely 19 and struggling with homesickness, spent hours reading letters from his girlfriend aloud to Courage. Sergeant Davis, a tough career soldier, secretly brought scraps from the mess hall, claiming he was just disposing of leftovers. Doc Martinez continued monitoring Courage's recovery, amazed by the animal's resilience. "I've seen humans give up with less severe injuries," he told Marcus. "This dog has something special, a will to live that's extraordinary." The shrapnel wounds were healing cleanly, and Courage was gradually gaining weight. More importantly, his personality was beginning to emerge. Despite his ordeal, Courage proved to be gentle and intelligent. He seemed to understand that he was in a safe place, and his gratitude toward Marcus was evident in every interaction. The dog would rest his head on Marcus's lap whenever possible, and his tail would wag weakly at the sound of the Marine's voice. It was clear that a bond was forming between them that went beyond simple rescue and recovery. The real test came during Courage's first week of mobility. A mortar attack hit the base during the early morning hours, sending everyone scrambling for cover. The explosions and chaos triggered something in Courage, and Marcus found him cowering in the corner of the tent, shaking uncontrollably. It became clear that the dog had likely experienced combat before. Perhaps he had belonged to coalition forces, or had survived previous attacks. Marcus spent hours calming Courage after the attack, speaking in soothing tones and offering gentle touches. Gradually, the dog's trembling subsided, but the incident revealed the depth of trauma they both carried. In that moment, Marcus realized that he and Courage were kindred spirits, both warriors who had seen too much, both struggling to find peace in a world of violence. As Courage's strength returned, so did his protective instincts. The dog began positioning himself between Marcus and any perceived threats, despite his own vulnerability. When unfamiliar personnel approached their area, Courage would stand and assess the situation, ready to defend his rescuer if necessary. This behavior impressed even the most skeptical Marines, who began to see Courage as more than just a stray dog. Captain Williams observed the transformation taking place, not just in Courage but in Marcus and the entire unit. Morale had improved significantly since the dog's arrival. Men who had been withdrawn and sullen were now engaged and purposeful. The presence of Courage provided a sense of normalcy and hope that had been missing from their deployment. However, challenges remained. Military regulations were strict about animals on base, and there were concerns about health risks and operational security. Captain Williams knew that eventually, decisions would need to be made about Courage's future. For now, He chose to focus on the positive impact the dog was having on his Marine's mental health and unit cohesion. Marcus began researching options for Courage's long-term care. He learned about military working dog programs and considered whether Courage might be suitable for training. The dog's intelligence and loyalty were obvious, but his trauma history could be a complicating factor. Marcus also started thinking about the possibility of adoption. Though the logistics of bringing a dog from Afghanistan to the United States seemed overwhelming, the turning point in their relationship came during a particularly difficult patrol. Marcus's unit was tasked with clearing a compound suspected of housing insurgents. The mission was routine until they encountered unexpected resistance, pinning them down in a firefight that lasted several hours. When Marcus finally returned to base, exhausted and emotionally drained, he found Courage waiting at the entrance to their tent. The dog seemed to sense Marcus's distress immediately. Without hesitation, Courage approached and gently nudged Marcus's hand, then settled beside him with his head resting against the Marine's leg. For the first time since the firefight, Marcus felt his tension begin to ease. The simple presence of this grateful animal provided a comfort that no amount of military training had prepared him for. That night, as Marcus reflected on the day's events, he realized that rescuing Courage had given him something invaluable, a sense of purpose beyond duty and survival. Taking care of the dog had reawakened his compassion and reminded him of the importance of protecting the innocent. In saving Courage, Marcus was discovering that he was also saving himself. The bond between them continued to strengthen with each passing day. Courage had become more than a rescued animal. He had become a source of hope and healing for an entire unit of Marines struggling to maintain their humanity in an inhumane situation. Neither Marcus nor Courage yet knew the challenges that lay ahead, but they faced an uncertain future together, each drawing strength from the other's unwavering loyalty and courage. 2 months into Courage's recovery, an unexpected visitor arrived at Forward Operating Base Chapman. Colonel Sarah Bennett, a military veterinarian from Bagram Airfield, had heard reports about the German Shepherd and came to investigate. Her arrival filled Marcus with both hope and dread. Hope that Courage might receive proper medical care, and dread that regulations might force them to separate. Colonel Bennett was a seasoned officer with over 15 years of experience working with military animals. She had seen countless cases of soldiers forming bonds with local animals, and most ended in heartbreak when deployment ended. However, as she observed the interaction between Marcus and Courage, she noticed something different. This wasn't simply a lonely soldier seeking companionship. This was a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and healing. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Colonel Bennett began after examining Courage thoroughly. This animal has remarkable bone structure and intelligence markers consistent with professional breeding. Where exactly did you find him? Marcus recounted the discovery in detail, describing the marketplace bombing and Courage's condition. The colonel listened intently, making notes and asking specific questions about the dog's behavior and recovery. During her examination, Colonel Bennett made a startling discovery. Hidden beneath the matted fur on Courage's neck was a faded tattoo, military identification markings used by coalition forces. The numbers were partially obscured by scar tissue, but enough remained visible to trace. Sergeant, this dog was likely a military working dog. These markings suggest he may have belonged to coalition forces at some point. The revelation changed everything. If Courage was indeed a former military working dog, different protocols applied. Colonel Bennett began the process of tracing the identification numbers through military databases, while Marcus waited anxiously for news. The possibility that Courage might have a previous handler created new complications, but it also opened doors that civilian animal adoption could not. While waiting for the database search results, Colonel Bennett observed Courage's interactions with the Marines. She was impressed by the dog's ability to sense distress and provide comfort to different soldiers. Private Thompson, who had been struggling with anxiety after losing his best friend in an IED explosion, found particular solace in Courage's presence. The dog seemed to instinctively know which Marines needed comfort most. This animal is providing significant therapeutic value, Colonel Bennett noted in her report. The psychological benefits to unit morale and individual mental health are measurable and substantial. She had seen therapy animals in clinical settings, but rarely had she witnessed such natural, intuitive emotional support from an untrained dog in a combat environment. The database search yielded surprising results. Courage had indeed been a military working dog, originally trained in Germany and deployed with British forces 3 years earlier. His original name was Kaiser, and he had served with distinction until his handler, Sergeant James McLeod, was killed in action. Kaiser had gone missing during the same attack that claimed his handler's life, and had been presumed dead for over 18 months. The discovery created a complex emotional situation for Marcus. Part of him felt guilty for renaming the dog and forming such a strong bond, knowing that Kaiser had previously belonged to another soldier who had died protecting others. However, Colonel Bennett helped him understand that the bond between Kaiser and his original handler had ended tragically, and the relationship with Marcus represented a new chapter in the dog's life. Animals, especially military working dogs, are remarkably adaptable, she explained. Kaiser grieved for his first handler, survived on his own, and has now chosen to trust again. That's a testament to both his resilience and your compassion. Sergeant. Her words provided Marcus with a new perspective on their relationship and helped alleviate some of his conflicted feelings. Colonel Bennett's presence also brought opportunities for enhanced care. She provided proper veterinary supplies and medication, ensuring that Kaiser's recovery would continue without complications. She also began evaluating his potential for returning to active duty, though she suspected that his trauma experiences might make him better suited for therapy work than combat operations. During her week-long visit, Colonel Bennett witnessed several incidents that convinced her of the unique nature of Marcus and Kaiser's partnership. One evening, Marcus suffered a severe anxiety attack triggered by nightmares about the IED explosion that had killed his teammates. Kaiser immediately sensed his distress, positioning himself across Marcus's chest and providing deep pressure therapy that gradually calmed the Marine's racing heart and panicked breathing. That's not trained behavior, Colonel Bennett observed. That's intuitive emotional intelligence. This dog has developed his own therapeutic techniques through experience and empathy. She documented these incidents carefully, building a case for Kaiser's continued presence at the base and potential future placement in therapeutic roles. The week passed quickly, and Colonel Bennett prepared to return to Bagram with her findings. Before leaving, she pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. Sergeant, I want you to know that what you've accomplished here is extraordinary. You didn't just save a dog's life. You've created a healing partnership that's benefiting your entire unit. I'm going to recommend that Kaiser remain with your team for the duration of your deployment. However, she also warned Marcus about the challenges ahead. When your deployment ends, decisions will need to be made about Kaiser's future. The military has protocols for retired working dogs, but his case is unique. Start thinking about what you want that future to look like, and be prepared to fight for it if necessary. As Colonel Bennett's helicopter disappeared into the desert sky, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Kaiser's presence had been officially acknowledged and temporarily approved, but the future remained uncertain. What Marcus didn't know was that Colonel Bennett had already begun making inquiries about adoption procedures and veteran support programs, setting in motion a process that would eventually reunite Marcus and Kaiser in civilian life. That evening, as Marcus sat with Kaiser watching the sunset over the Afghan mountains, he made a silent promise. Whatever obstacles lay ahead, whatever bureaucratic challenges they would face, he would find a way to ensure that their partnership continued beyond military service. Kaiser had saved him in ways that went far beyond companionship, and Marcus was determined to provide the same loyalty in return. Their journey together was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The final months of Marcus's deployment brought unexpected challenges that would test both his and Kaiser's resilience. News arrived that their unit would be extending their tour by 6 weeks due to increased insurgent activity in the region. For most Marines, this was devastating news that shattered plans for homecoming. For Marcus, it meant more time with Kaiser, but also increased danger for both of them. The extension coincided with a new mission assignment. Marcus's unit was tasked with training Afghan National Army recruits at a remote outpost 30 miles from their current base. The transfer meant leaving the relative safety and comfort they had established, moving to a more primitive location with fewer amenities and greater security risks. Most concerning for Marcus was whether Kaiser would be allowed to accompany them. Captain Williams called Marcus into his office to discuss the situation. Rodriguez, I've received approval for Kaiser to transfer with the unit, but I need to be honest with you. The new location is more dangerous, and having a dog there will create additional complications. Are you sure this is what you want? Marcus's answer was immediate and unwavering. He couldn't imagine facing the remaining weeks of deployment without Kaiser by his side. The transfer to Forward Operating Base Wolverine proved challenging from the start. The facility was smaller, more isolated, and housed a mixture of American Marines and Afghan soldiers who had varying levels of experience with military animals. Some of the Afghan recruits were fearful of large dogs due to cultural backgrounds, while others were curious about Kaiser's obvious intelligence and training. Kaiser adapted to the new environment with remarkable flexibility, but Marcus noticed changes in the dog's behavior. The increased stress and constant alert status required at the remote outpost affected Kaiser, just as it did the human personnel. He became more vigilant, sleeping less deeply and maintaining constant awareness of his surroundings. The trauma from his past experiences seemed to resurface in this more threatening environment. Despite these challenges, Kaiser's presence continued to provide invaluable support to the Marines. During a particularly intense rocket attack that lasted several hours, Kaiser moved methodically through the bunkers, checking on each Marine and providing comfort to those who were struggling with fear or panic. His calm demeanor and reassuring presence helped maintain unit cohesion during one of their most stressful experiences. The turning point came during a training exercise with Afghan recruits. One young soldier, barely 18 years old, was struggling with homesickness and the pressure of military training. Language barriers made it difficult for the American Marines to provide effective support, but Kaiser seemed to transcend these limitations. The dog approached the distressed recruit and simply sat beside him, offering silent companionship that needed no translation. "Look at that," observed Lieutenant Garcia, watching the interaction. "That dog understands something we don't. He knows that sometimes presence matters more than words." The incident marked the beginning of Kaiser's unofficial role as a therapy animal for both American and Afghan personnel, bridging cultural and language gaps through simple compassion. Word of Kaiser's therapeutic abilities reached higher command levels, and Marcus received an unexpected communication from Colonel Bennett. She had been following their progress and had recommendations for Kaiser's future beyond military service. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she wrote, "Kaiser's natural abilities and your partnership have created something unique. I've been researching veteran therapy programs, and I believe you both could have a significant impact in civilian life." The letter included information about organizations that trained therapy dogs for veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and other combat-related conditions. Colonel Bennett suggested that Marcus consider pursuing certification for both himself and Kaiser as a therapy team. The idea was appealing, but it also required Marcus to think seriously about his own future beyond the Marine Corps. As his deployment neared its end, Marcus began experiencing mixed emotions about returning home. While he longed to see his family and return to civilian comforts, he worried about Kaiser's adjustment to life outside the military. The dog had thrived in the structured environment of military service, and Marcus wasn't sure how he would adapt to suburban life in Los Angeles. The bureaucratic challenges of bringing Kaiser home proved more complex than Marcus had anticipated. Despite his status as a former military working dog, Kaiser's case didn't fit standard adoption procedures. His disappearance and presumed death had complicated his official status, and navigating the paperwork required intervention from multiple levels of command. Colonel Bennett became an unexpected ally in this process, using her influence to expedite necessary approvals and coordinate with veteran organizations in the United States. She also connected Marcus with Sergeant James McLeod's family in Scotland, who had been notified of Kaiser's survival. The conversation was emotional but healing, as McLeod's parents expressed their gratitude that their son's partner had found new purpose and happiness. James would be happy knowing that Kaiser saved another soldier. McLeod's father told Marcus during their video call, "You've given him a second chance at life, and he's done the same for you." That's exactly what James would have wanted. The blessing from Kaiser's original handler's family provided Marcus with closure and strengthened his resolve to provide Kaiser with the best possible future. The final weeks at Forward Operating Base Wolverine passed quickly as Marcus completed his duties while simultaneously preparing for Kaiser's transition to civilian life. The process involved medical examinations, behavioral evaluations, and coordination with quarantine facilities in the United States. Each step brought them closer to starting their new life together, but also highlighted the magnitude of the commitment Marcus was making. On their last night in Afghanistan, Marcus sat with Kaiser under the desert stars, reflecting on their journey together. From the dying dog he had discovered in the rubble to the confident, healing companion beside him now, Kaiser had transformed completely. But Marcus realized that his own transformation had been equally dramatic. The angry, guilt-ridden Marine who had found Kaiser no longer existed. In his place was a man with purpose, compassion, and hope for the future. "We're going home, boy," Marcus whispered, scratching behind Kaiser's ears. "It's going to be different, but we'll figure it out together." Kaiser's response was a gentle nudge against Marcus's shoulder, a gesture that had become their private language of understanding and trust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face them as they had faced everything else, together, with courage and unwavering loyalty to each other. The journey home proved to be an emotional roller coaster that tested every aspect of Marcus and Kaiser's bond. Their first stop was a military quarantine facility in Germany, where Kaiser would spend 30 days in isolation to ensure he carried no diseases that could threaten American livestock or wildlife. For Marcus, this separation after months of constant companionship felt like abandonment, even though he understood its necessity. The facility in Kaiserslautern was well equipped and staffed by professionals who understood the importance of military working dogs. But Kaiser struggled with the confinement. After experiencing freedom and purpose in Afghanistan, being locked in a kennel felt like punishment. Marcus visited daily during his own processing period, but their interactions were limited to supervised meetings through chain-link fencing. During the third week of quarantine, Kaiser stopped eating. The veterinary staff expressed concern about depression and recommended that Marcus spend more time at the facility. "He's grieving," explained Dr. Schmidt, the German veterinarian overseeing Kaiser's care. "Some dogs interpret separation from their handlers as abandonment. He needs reassurance that you're coming back for him." Marcus began sleeping in his car outside the facility, positioning himself where Kaiser could see him through the kennel window. Gradually, the dog's appetite returned and his spirits improved. The experience reinforced for Marcus just how deeply their bond had developed and how much responsibility he had taken on. Kaiser wasn't just a pet. He was a partner who depended on Marcus for emotional security and purpose. The final week of quarantine brought welcome news. All of Kaiser's health tests had come back negative, and arrangements were finalized for their flight to Los Angeles. Marcus had spent the month researching therapy dog training programs and veteran support organizations, laying the groundwork for their transition to civilian life. Colonel Bennett had provided letters of recommendation that opened doors with several prestigious programs. The flight to Los Angeles International Airport was Kaiser's first experience on a civilian aircraft. Despite his military training, the unfamiliar sounds and sensations created anxiety that manifested in panting and restlessness. Marcus was allowed to sit beside Kaiser's carrier, providing constant reassurance during the 11-hour journey. Other passengers, learning about their story from sympathetic flight attendants, offered encouragement and support throughout the flight. Arriving in Los Angeles felt surreal for both of them. The busy airport, crowds of civilians, and overwhelming sensory input created culture shock that neither had anticipated. Kaiser remained close to Marcus's side, clearly uncomfortable with the chaos around them. Marcus realized that their adjustment period would be longer and more complex than he had initially expected. Marcus's family welcomed them with a celebration that quickly became overwhelming for Kaiser. The well-meaning gathering of relatives and friends, complete with decorations and loud conversations, sent the dog seeking refuge under Marcus's bed. "He's been living in a war zone," Marcus explained to his disappointed family. "He needs time to adjust to normal life just like I do." The first month in civilian life brought unexpected challenges. Marcus's childhood bedroom felt claustrophobic after months of open desert landscapes. Suburban sounds like garbage trucks, lawnmowers, and children playing triggered hypervigilance in both Marcus and Kaiser. Simple activities like grocery shopping became exhausting ordeals that required careful planning and preparation. Kaiser's behavior reflected his own struggles with transition. The confident, purposeful military dog seemed lost without a mission or structure. He followed Marcus everywhere, unable to relax unless his handler was in sight. Nights were particularly difficult as Kaiser would pace the house, checking doors and windows in response to every unfamiliar sound. Marcus recognized these behaviors because he was experiencing similar symptoms himself. The breakthrough came when Marcus contacted Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a psychologist specializing in veteran transition issues who had been recommended by Colonel Bennett. Dr. Hernandez understood that Marcus and Kaiser were dealing with parallel adjustment disorders and suggested they begin therapy together. "Your healing journeys are interconnected," she explained. "Working on them simultaneously will benefit both of you." Dr. Hernandez introduced them to a program called Pause for Patriots, which trained veteran dog teams to provide therapy services to other veterans struggling with combat-related issues. The program recognized that the shared experience of trauma could create powerful healing partnerships when properly channeled. For the first time since returning home, Marcus felt a sense of purpose returning. The training program was intensive and challenging. Marcus had to learn about psychology, communication techniques, and therapeutic intervention strategies. Kaiser underwent extensive behavioral evaluation and training to enhance his natural empathetic abilities. The process revealed just how much both of them had grown during their time together in Afghanistan. 3 months into the program, Marcus and Kaiser made their first official therapy visit to a Veterans Administration hospital. They were assigned to work with David, a young Army veteran who had lost both legs in an IED explosion and was struggling with severe depression. Initially skeptical about animal therapy, David's demeanor changed completely when Kaiser approached his wheelchair and gently placed his head on David's lap. "He knows," David whispered, tears streaming down his face. "He understands what it's like." The connection was immediate and profound. Kaiser seemed to recognize a kindred spirit in David, another warrior who had been wounded in service to his country. Over the following weeks, their therapy sessions became a source of hope and healing for David, who began engaging more actively in his recovery program. Word of Marcus and Kaiser's effectiveness spread throughout the veteran community. They were invited to participate in support groups, individual therapy sessions, and public speaking events about military service and recovery. The purposeful work gave both of them a sense of mission that had been missing since leaving Afghanistan. 6 months after returning home, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from Afghanistan. Captain Williams, now promoted to major, was calling to check on their progress. "Rodriguez, I wanted you to know that your story has become legendary here. We've got 3 more Marines who've formed bonds with local animals, and they're all citing you and Kaiser as inspiration. You've started something important." The conversation reminded Marcus of how far they had traveled, both literally and figuratively, since that day in the Kandahar marketplace. The dying dog he had rescued had become a healing force for dozens of veterans. The broken Marine who had felt responsible for his teammates' deaths had found new purpose in helping others heal from similar trauma. That evening, as Marcus and Kaiser prepared for another day of therapy work, Marcus reflected on the unexpected path their lives had taken. He had entered the Marine Corps seeking adventure and purpose, but had found something far more valuable, a partnership that transformed not only his own life, but the lives of countless others. Kaiser, stretched out contentedly beside him, seemed to sense his handler's peaceful mood and responded with a gentle tail wag that spoke volumes about trust, loyalty, and the healing power of unconditional love. 2 years after returning from Afghanistan, Marcus and Kaiser had established themselves as one of the most effective therapy teams in Southern California. Their reputation grew beyond the veteran community, as word spread about their unique ability to connect with people suffering from various forms of trauma. What made their partnership special wasn't just Kaiser's natural empathy, but Marcus's understanding of what it meant to carry invisible wounds. The turning point in their civilian mission came when they were invited to work with first responders suffering from post-traumatic stress. The Los Angeles Fire Department had experienced a series of traumatic incidents, including a deadly warehouse fire that claimed the lives of 2 firefighters. The survivors were struggling with guilt and anxiety that threatened their ability to continue serving their community. Captain Rodriguez, Marcus had been promoted within the Pause for Patriots organization, arrived at fire station, 47 with Kaiser to find a group of hardened firefighters who were skeptical about animal therapy. These were men and women accustomed to facing danger head-on, and the idea of needing help from a dog challenged their self-image as protectors and heroes. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, one of the survivors of the warehouse fire, was particularly resistant. She had been first through the door when the roof collapsed, and she blamed herself for not detecting the structural weakness that led to her colleagues' deaths. "I don't need a therapy dog," she told Marcus bluntly. "I need my friends back." Her words struck Marcus deeply because he recognized the same survivor's guilt that had haunted him after losing his teammates in Afghanistan. Kaiser seemed to sense the emotional undercurrents in the room immediately. Rather than approaching the group directly, he positioned himself near the station's memorial wall, where photos of fallen firefighters hung in silent tribute. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. Here was a dog who understood loss and was paying his respects to the fallen heroes. The breakthrough came during their third visit when an emergency call came in during their session. A multi-car accident on the freeway required immediate response, and the firefighters began suiting up with practiced efficiency. However, Marcus noticed that Lieutenant Chen was hesitating, her hands shaking as she reached for her gear. The signs of anxiety were unmistakable. Without being asked, Kaiser approached Chen and performed the deep pressure therapy technique he had developed with Marcus. The dog positioned himself against her legs, providing calming weight and steady breathing that helped regulate her own panic response. Within minutes, Chen's shaking subsided, and she was able to complete her preparations and respond to the emergency call. When the crew returned from their successful rescue operation, Chen sought out Marcus and Kaiser. "I don't know how he knew," she said, tears flowing freely, "but that dog saved my career today. I've been having panic attacks every time we get a call, and I was ready to quit. But when he pressed against me, I felt calm for the first time in months." Her public acknowledgement opened the floodgates for other firefighters to admit their own struggles and seek help. The success with the fire department led to invitations from police departments, emergency medical services, and other first responder organizations. Marcus and Kaiser found themselves traveling throughout California, bringing their unique form of healing to people who dedicated their lives to helping others. Each new group presented different challenges, but the fundamental message remained the same. Trauma was not a sign of weakness, and healing was possible with the right support. Their growing reputation attracted the attention of national media outlets. A documentary crew followed Marcus and Kaiser for several months, capturing their work with various groups and exploring the science behind animal-assisted therapy. The resulting film, Brothers in Arms, A Marine and His Dog, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and brought national attention to their mission. The documentary's success opened doors that Marcus had never imagined. Speaking invitations poured in from universities, medical conferences, and veteran organizations across the country. However, the increased visibility also brought pressure and expectations that sometimes felt overwhelming. Marcus worried that the attention might be changing their mission from genuine healing work to public performance. Kaiser seemed to understand the difference between authentic therapeutic interactions and staged media events. During filming sessions, he would perform adequately, but without the deep emotional connection that characterized his real therapy work. Marcus learned to trust Kaiser's instincts, declining opportunities that felt more about publicity than purpose. The most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Marcus received a letter from Scotland written by Margaret MacLeod, the mother of Kaiser's original handler. She had seen the documentary and wanted to express her gratitude for the life Marcus had given Kaiser after her son's death. "James always believed that Kaiser was special," she wrote. "Seeing him help other veterans heal gives meaning to both their sacrifices." The letter included a photograph of Sergeant James MacLeod with Kaiser during their deployment, showing the same bond of trust and partnership that Marcus now shared with the dog. Looking at the image, Marcus felt a profound connection to the fallen soldier and a renewed sense of responsibility to honor both their legacies through continued service. As their third year of civilian partnership began, Marcus made a significant decision. He enrolled in graduate school to pursue a master's degree in clinical psychology, with a focus on trauma therapy and animal-assisted interventions. The decision meant reducing their active therapy work temporarily, But Marcus believed that formal education would make their long-term impact more significant. Kaiser adapted to the new routine of academic life with characteristic flexibility. He became a regular presence on campus, attending lectures and study groups where his calming presence helped reduce student stress during exam periods. Professors in the psychology department began incorporating Kaiser into their research projects, studying the physiological effects of animal interaction on stress hormones and healing responses. The research component of their work proved fascinating. Brain scans of trauma victims before and after sessions with Kaiser showed measurable changes in areas associated with anxiety and emotional regulation. Heart rate monitors documented the immediate calming effects of Kaiser's presence, providing scientific validation for what Marcus had observed anecdotally for years. One particular study focused on Kaiser's ability to detect emotional distress before it became visible to human observers. Researchers found that Kaiser could identify rising anxiety levels in study participants an average of 3 minutes before trained therapists noticed the same symptoms. This early warning system had profound implications for preventing panic attacks and emotional crises. The academic environment also provided opportunities for training other therapy dog teams. Marcus developed a curriculum that combined his military experience, psychological training, and practical knowledge gained through years of working with Kaiser. The program attracted veterans from across the country who wanted to follow a similar path with their own canine partners. However, the most rewarding aspect of their academic period came from individual success stories. Maria, a combat medic struggling with survivor's guilt after losing patients in a field hospital, found healing through sessions with Marcus and Kaiser. Tony, a police officer who had been involved in a fatal shooting, regained his confidence and returned to duty after working with their team. Each success story reinforced Marcus's understanding that his and Kaiser's purpose extended far beyond their own healing. They had become catalysts for transformation in others, helping people discover their own resilience and capacity for recovery. The dying dog he had rescued in Afghanistan had evolved into a healing force that touched hundreds of lives. As Marcus approached graduation, he began planning the next phase of their mission. He envisioned establishing a comprehensive treatment center that would combine traditional therapy with animal-assisted interventions, serving veterans, first responders, and trauma survivors from all backgrounds. The center would also serve as a training facility for other therapy teams and a research hub for advancing the science of animal-assisted healing. Kaiser, now 8 years old, remained enthusiastic about their work, but showed occasional signs of the wear that came with years of absorbing others' emotional pain. Marcus began considering the possibility of training a successor, ensuring that their mission could continue even as Kaiser eventually transitioned to retirement. The idea of adding another dog to their team was both exciting and daunting, as Kaiser had set an impossibly high standard for therapeutic partnership. 5 years after returning from Afghanistan, Marcus stood before the newly opened Rodriguez Kaiser Center for Trauma Recovery, watching Kaiser explore the spacious grounds of their dream facility. The center, built with funding from veteran organizations, private donors, and proceeds from the documentary, represented the culmination of their journey from a dusty marketplace in Kandahar to becoming pioneers in animal-assisted therapy. The grand opening ceremony drew an impressive crowd of supporters, including Colonel Bennett, now retired and serving on the center's board of directors. Captain Williams, who had taken leave from his current command, delivered a keynote speech about the ripple effects of compassion in military culture. Most meaningfully, several of the veterans and first responders who had been helped by Marcus and Kaiser attended to share their own success stories. David, the Army veteran who had been their first therapy client, arrived in his wheelchair with his own service dog, a German shepherd named Hope, whom he was training to help other disabled veterans. "You showed me that my wounds didn't define my worth," he told the assembled crowd. "Now I want to pass that gift forward to others who are struggling like I was." His transformation from a suicidal patient to a successful peer counselor exemplified the center's mission of turning survivors into healers. Lieutenant Sarah Chen from the Los Angeles Fire Department had become one of their most effective advocates within the first responder community. She now led a program that paired therapy dogs with fire stations throughout the region, helping firefighters cope with the cumulative stress of emergency response work. Kaiser taught me that strength comes in many forms, she explained to reporters. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept help when you need it. The center's design reflected everything Marcus had learned about trauma recovery. Open spaces provided a sense of freedom and safety, while quiet rooms offered privacy for individual sessions. The canine training facility allowed for the development of new therapy teams, while research laboratories enabled ongoing study of animal-assisted interventions. Most importantly, the entire facility was designed to feel welcoming rather than clinical, more like a retreat than a medical facility. Kaiser's role had evolved along with the center's development. At 9 years old, he had transitioned from active therapy work to serving as a mentor for younger dogs entering the program. His natural teaching ability seemed to transfer to canines as easily as it had to humans, and he took special interest in helping traumatized rescue dogs overcome their own fears and develop confidence. Marcus had indeed found a successor for Kaiser in Luna, a young German shepherd rescued from a puppy mill and trained specifically for therapy work. The introduction of Luna to their team had been carefully managed, with Kaiser playing an integral role in her training and socialization. Watching Kaiser guide Luna through her first therapy sessions was like seeing a master craftsman pass on his knowledge to an apprentice. The center's research component had produced groundbreaking findings about the neurological mechanisms underlying animal-assisted therapy. Brain imaging studies showed that interaction with therapy dogs activated the same neural pathways involved in human bonding and trust formation. These discoveries had implications far beyond veteran therapy, influencing treatment approaches for childhood trauma, autism spectrum disorders, and various anxiety conditions. Marcus's own academic achievements had culminated in a doctoral degree in clinical psychology, with his dissertation focusing on the unique therapeutic benefits of veteran dog partnerships. His research had been published in prestigious journals and presented at international conferences, establishing him as a leading authority in the field. However, the accolades meant less to him than the individual lives that continued to be transformed through their work. The center's impact extended internationally as well. Veterans from other countries had traveled to California to learn their methods, and Marcus had consulted on similar programs in Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom. The model they had developed was being replicated worldwide, creating a global network of trauma recovery centers that honored the healing power of the human-animal bond. One of the most touching developments came from an unexpected source. The British military had established a memorial program honoring Sergeant James McLeod and his service with Kaiser. The program provided therapy dogs to wounded British veterans, with each dog bearing a collar tag inscribed with McLeod's motto, "Courage under fire." Marcus had been invited to speak at the program's dedication, where he met several veterans whose lives had been saved by McLeod during his deployment. As the center's first anniversary approached, Marcus reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him and Kaiser to this point. What had begun as a simple act of compassion toward a dying dog had evolved into a mission that touched thousands of lives. The ripple effects continued to expand as graduates of their program established their own therapy practices and training. Facilities. Kaiser's health had remained remarkably good despite his age and the emotional demands of his work. Regular veterinary care and a lifestyle balanced between purpose and rest had kept him active and engaged. However, Marcus was increasingly aware that their time together was finite, and he was determined to make every moment count while preparing for an eventual transition. The legacy they were building extended far beyond any individual partnership. The Rodriguez-Kaiser Center had trained over 50 therapy dog teams, provided treatment to more than 1,000 trauma survivors, and influenced therapeutic practices worldwide. More importantly, it had demonstrated that healing was possible for even the most severely wounded warriors. Whether human or canine, on quiet evenings at the center, Marcus would walk the grounds with Kaiser and Luna, reflecting on the miraculous transformation that had occurred since that day in Kandahar. The dying dog he had rescued had become the inspiration for a healing revolution that continued to spread. The broken Marine who had carried guilt and anger had found peace and purpose beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. Their story had become a testament to the power of compassion, the resilience of the human spirit, and the healing potential of the bonds we form with those who need us most. As they watched the sunset paint the California sky in brilliant colors, Marcus knew that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. Together they had proven that sometimes the most profound acts of heroism come not from fighting, but from choosing to heal themselves and others with courage, dedication, and unconditional love.